This is Harmony, a Unitarian Universalist community. We are a lay-led congregation based in the northeast suburbs of Cincinnati, balancing faith and reason since 2009.
Not even sure what this is. Oh, this is our topic. Sorry, Sally, you're our sermon leader today? Is that right?
That is correct.
Very good. Well, I will turn it over to you. And can I click your slides for you?
Yes, please.
Okay, just give me a clue as to when.
I will say next slide when it's time for the next slide. Alrighty. So, good morning. I've been a member of this Harmony UU community for 5 years now. And I tell people I am a Universalist Unitarian when I can manage to get that in the right order. But I don't know much about UUA as an organized, quote, religion. For reasons I will be explaining as they come up, I wanted to know more, and now I want to share with you what I found out. I'm going to start with some historical facts: who, what, when, where, why. And I got most of my information on this history and stuff from Wikipedia. I will occasionally think into quotations, and I may or may not acknowledge them. I'm sure there's much better sources for a true study of the subject, but this is what you get when you don't pay your speakers.
Amen, sister.
I'm sorry?
I said amen.
Unitarian Universalist Association, which is what UUA stands for. Gee, the A doesn't stand for America. Wow. Is a liberal religious association of Unitarian Universalist congregations. It was formed in 1961. It was formed by the consolidation of two other founding groups called the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America. So, first of all, very interesting. That's only 59 years ago. There's about 200,000 members in the US. They're headquartered in Boston, and UUA is one of 17 members of something called the International Council of Unitarians and Universalists. Here we go again. How many times you got to keep those words straight? And the International Council has about 800,000 members worldwide. So we're global. I just didn't realize it. I thought UUA was America. I don't know. So anyway, let's talk about those standing organizations. So Paul, if you could do the next slide for me, I would appreciate it. Let me make sure. See the slide as well as my doc. I need to move this over here. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So what was American Unitarian Association? What was the AUA? The American Unitarian Association was formed in 1825. There was a split within New England's what was called the congregational churches between those that embraced Unitarian ideas and those that wanted to maintain Calvinist theology. So Unitarian ideas, from what I read, is they deny the Trinity of the doctrine of the Trinity as, unscriptural. They believe that the Bible should be interpreted rationally, but not in a literal manner. The Calvinists, I always connect Calvinism with this concept of a fatalistic preordination of who will be saved and who are chosen by God. So we had New England congregational churches, and these are, of course, they came out of the Reformation, and even in 1820s, this was evolving, and this was a split, and so between Congregationalist churches. So on the slide, which I borrowed from Wikipedia, was one of my first finds. This is a term called polity. In this case, congregational polity. And it's often known as congregationalism. What this is a system by which every local church congregation is independent and autonomous. It's different than ecclesiastical, where there's a hierarchy of bishops, there's a chain of command. There's also all kinds of different ones, and I'm not going to go too far in the weeds on this, but Others have ways of having group governance over churches in matters of doctrine, and we don't have that with UUA. There are other Protestant churches that employ this Congregationalist model, Quakers, Baptists, the Congregational Methodist Church, not the United Methodist Church. So I think the Methodists are a good example. There's two different forms. One does the Congregational way, where you're autonomous, and one does the United Methodist way, and where there's some governance of the individual churches. All of this, again, descended from the Puritan movement. The Puritans were much more Congregationalists. Today, there's a growing number of non-denominational megachurches, like our neighbors Crossroads. These are Congregationalists too. So it's still out there. It's not limited to Christian churches. There's Jewish synagogues, Sikhs, and there's even Islamic mosques that operate this way with no hierarchies. All right, I hope that wasn't too intellectualized, but my road to giving this sermon began in January of this year. I was opening some mail for Harmony from UUA, and I noticed information about something called the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee presentation. And it can be used as a sermon topic, or it can be used as an entire service. It was kind of a package deal, and we've said from time to time, maybe we should think about using these things, us being the board. Kind of what it said was, since UUSC's, the service committee's founding in May of 1940, Unitarian Universalist congregations have been fundamental partners in our work to advance human rights. We invite your congregation to join UUSC this spring as we explore key highlights and lessons of our history and look forward to the next 80 years. Oh, here we go. Here's our timeline again. This was actually started by the Unitarian Universalists back before, the American Unitarian Association back before the merger. So it predates, it's 80 years, and it predates that 59 years of the merger. This just got me on my road of, I have no idea how UUA works. There's something called a UUSC Sunday annual program that complements guests at your table. I only see these things in bits and pieces like flower communion and water communion Sunday because I didn't grow up in a UUA church, and I don't appreciate the traditions behind all of these things. So I learned a lot from just this opening the mail. So anyway, this service committee works to provide disaster relief and promote human rights and social justice. It does this through grassroots collaborators. Aren't those all the buzzwords of our day? Aren't those all the things that we're all talking about right now in our lives? And so this service committee, which started 80 years ago, is really still involved in things that are in the mainstream of our lives today. So when it was founded in 1940, it was specifically to help European refugees endangered by Nazi persecution. And Paul, if you want to go to the next slide, please. The founding director had served as a diplomat for American Unitarian Association for more than a decade. And he was worried about the plight of refugees in Czechoslovakia, which had a large number of Unitarians. So they opened an office in Lisbon, and they sent two American Unitarians to there. They sent Wade Still Sharp and his wife, Martha. And you may remember, like me, hearing about Defying the Nazis, Sharp's War. It was a 2016 documentary film directed by Ken Burns and Artemis Lokowski, and it was shown on PBS. So it's a film about the Sharps. They left their children behind in the care of their parish back in Massachusetts and committed to this mission in Europe. And that was the start of what UUSC was about. It's not a bad history to be a part of. And now I realize what people were saying in passing 4 years ago when they were talking about, oh, this is part of the history of UUA. It just didn't click in my brain at the time. All right, so next slide. Let's go on to the other founder, which was the Universalist Church of America. The early roots of Universalism go back to early Christianity. Their defining theology was universal salvation. There was a lot going on, early Christianity. What did Christianity really mean? What did it stand for? I'm no expert on all this stuff, but in the first centuries, there were different schools, and not all of them believed that what Universalists did. Universalists believed that God's love would not create a person knowing that that person would be destined for eternal damnation. Okay? So basically, they sort of didn't believe in hell, or they didn't believe in that people would end up in hell, that somehow there would be a redemption, that if you didn't believe in everybody going straight to heaven, you believed that they'd be able to redeem themselves and get to heaven and get out of hell. So there were a lot of different various Protestant Reformation movements in Europe that American Universalism developed from. Quakers, Moravians, Methodists again, Lutherans, a lot of Germans. And these Germans, in my mind, must have been the ones that were leaving Germany and looking for religious freedom in America. They were abolitionists, and they believed in a strong separation of church and state because they had, in the past, been forced to financially support state churches, which they didn't belong to. This was the system under which they lived before they came to America, and they were, dedicated to America having a separation where that wouldn't happen to them again. It all got going in the mid-1700s. They had a general society in 1778. This is right around the time of the Revolution, if you'll notice. It started with a New England convention. At its peak in 1830, the Universalist Church was reported to have been the 9th largest denomination in the United States. So next slide, please. And this I am taking pretty much straight from Wikipedia. It's about Benjamin Rush. The Universalists consider him to be one of their founders. He was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he believed in the teachings of universal salvation. Interestingly, he really never joined a Universalist church. He had many friends, and he was kind of alongside them. He's known as a vigorous foe of slavery. He advocated for the abolition of the death penalty back in the day. He advocated for better education for women. He supported free public schools. He was a pioneer in the study and treatment of mental illness and insisted that the insane had the right to be treated with respect. He published a pamphlet on the inequity of the slave trade. As part of his abolitionism, he organized the Pennsylvania Society for Promoting the Abolition of Slavery and the Relief of Free Negroes Unlawfully Held in Bondage. This was the first anti-slavery society in America, and he was its president. Again, another founding organization that's nothing to sneeze at, and something I'm pretty happy and proud to be part of that history as well. All right, next slide. So let's turn to the consolidated entity, the Unitarian Universalist Assembly. Our congregations seek inspiration and derive insight from major religions. It's interesting to me that all these predecessor organizations were Christian, but our church, our UUA church of today, isn't. it's been my experience in Harmony, and it's what you see around the world, that we draw wisdom from various religions and philosophies, including humanism, pantheism, Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Judaism, Islam, and even earth-centered spirituality. That's been my experience. I used to say for a long time that I was a Catholic that attended a UU church. I was still a Catholic, but I went to a UU church. So anyway, the UUs just had their big party, a general assembly. They do this every year. It was virtual for the first time this year. I didn't get a chance to do much with this. I really wished I had had more time, but it just got away from me. I went to a General Assembly orientation meeting, and I got really interested, but again, time just didn't have it. So I hope to look back over that and find out more about what happens in those. It was kind of a glance into something that looked a little bit more like church or traditional, but I think that's mostly because there's ministers and choirs and buildings involved in this, and Harmony just doesn't have that. So, all right, hope I'm doing okay on time. And please stick with me, because I have more UUs for you. Next slide, please. UU the Vote is a program of UUA. The Universalist Unitarian Justice Ohio, UUJO. Harmony has been a member of this organization for some time. And I've only known about that kind of in passing. The Universalist Unitarian Council of Greater Cincinnati, UUCGC. The board recently decided to participate in this group in order to be better linked into the communities, you know, in our in the Cincinnati area. I just want to skip quickly to what I'm excited about, which is UU the Vote. I'm going to be getting involved in this. If you know me, you know I volunteer during election seasons, but I believe getting out the vote, all votes, during 2020 is critical to our country's future. I'm going to stop there because the Reverend Joan Van Beckler, I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm pretty sure, is the executive director of the Unitarian, let me see if I'm on the right. Oh, I didn't make you switch slides, Paul. I'm sorry. Can you switch slides? I should have had you go to this earlier. Sorry. This is UU the Vote. This is the Unitarian Universalist Justice Ohio. This is the and this is the symbol for Unitarian Universalist Council. But this is the name of the executive director of UUJO, right here. And she's going to fill the pulpit for us on August 2nd to talk about voter suppression and election protection. And this is an intersection between UU the Vote and UUJO. So Harmony does do its own social justice work. We do Guests at the Table, our table, Matthew 25 ministry, we do peanut butter mystery, at least we have in the past when we've been able to do this. We can't do that in appropriate ways right now. We do the Giving Tree at Christmas, and Libby is our board member who looks for new opportunities for us to do social justice work. In this year's budget, we actually set aside money. Instead of $100, we set aside, I think it's $1,000 to see if there wasn't something else that we could commit our community to in the area of social justice. And we haven't come up with anything yet, but I just thought that that kind of intersected and I wanted to point that out. So these are strange times, and I know that everybody is overwhelmed about a lot of things, but I just wonder if anybody else is interested in doing more. Maybe you can talk about this in your discussion groups. There's systemic racism, there's voter suppression, there's the human response to the coronavirus. These are all social justice issues, and we're a small little community, but you know, the principle of you know, it starts, you know, small. You know, the only thing you can really do to change the world is change yourself and what you do. I just wanted to think about that a little bit, and maybe myself and maybe other people want to as well. A few final words about my journey. I was raised Catholic, and I remained a practicing Catholic until I think it was about 2012. It might have been 13. I couldn't go into my parish church without being angry about things within the parish and within the wider Catholic Church. I was pissed off every time I went to that building, and I couldn't do it anymore. My Catholicism was Pope John Paul XXIII and Paul VI and the social justice Catholicism of the 60s and the 70s. It was not the conservative, to me, unwelcoming church that the Catholic Church is today. I started my quest with Karen Gottschall at around the same time. We tried Mason United Methodist Church for a bit. Karen was the one that, when it wasn't fitting anymore, I wasn't sure why, and Karen's the one that figured it out. She says, it's gotten too Catholic. So we quit going. My friend Maori Bandaraga, somebody I worked with at Proctor for many years, she loved her Northern Hills UU Church, Universalist Unitarian. I was interested in learning more about it, but I found a closer UU community in Harmony. Of course, I found it by Google. That's how we find this place. And I think it was my second visit where I heard John King talk about why a Catholic would go to UU services twice a month. I will always remember his Rick Santorum versus Joe Biden Catholic slide, and John has allowed me to reshare his words from that day. If you go on to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry. I'm forgetting my slides. There it is. Now we're on the right one. Sorry. Back to my slides. Not watching my slides. Okay. So, Rick Santorum. A lot of conservative Catholics put Rick Santorum on a pedestal of the ideal Catholic male devotion today, a rock of unyielding belief, standing against the swirling and strengthening tide of sin in the modern world. The fact that he could do this while often wearing a sweater vest is admittedly remarkable. But his views on women's rights, the rights of gays to marry, and financial conservatism at the expense of social programs stand in direct opposition to the views of many more progressive Catholics, myself, John, and myself, Sally, included. If you'd like to learn more about Santorum, ask around, but never ever Google him. Now, in opposition, everybody loves Joe, right? True. He's developed a bumbling Cousin Eddie sort of reputation. I think at least half of the audience of the State of the Union each year is there to see what he'll do when he's perfectly placed for the greatest photobomb opportunity in the free world. A devout Catholic. He attends Mass regularly, always carries his rosary, and cites Catholic teachings often during debate. His selection as Barack Obama's running mate in 2008 also opened debates within the church about whether those who hold a pro-choice position should be allowed to celebrate communion. He holds many other viewpoints that differ from traditional church teachings, including support of embryonic stem cell research, the death penalty, and opposition to the now dead ban on same-sex marriage. So I included this because it's part of my journey, but I think it's also kind of ironic looking where Joe is today. And in case you don't know what kind of a Catholic I was, next slide, please. I drove a van in a Joe Biden motorcade in 2012 and had my picture taken with him. When I spoke to him, I actually said to him, thank you for your example of how to be a Catholic. Next slide. I have been a member of Harmony UUA for 5 years now. And now my journey makes me realize that this is my home. I recently got this message. Thank you, Susan Jackson and Jen Gillum. Happy Harmony anniversary, Sally. According to our records, you have been a member of Harmony since June 7th, 2015. It's a good opportunity to remind you how important you are to our small UU community. Thank you for your unique contributions and for just being you. Here's to another year of balancing faith and reason at Harmony together. So, I really am here. I really am a Universalist Unitarian. This is the right place for me at this point in my life and at this point time in the world. I want to thank all of you for enriching my life. And I won't say that my dear friend, Karen Gottschall, believes in reincarnation, but I know that she loved the concept. So in closing, to the spirit of Karen, or the reincarnation of Karen, whichever one is out there, I just want to say, I did it. I gave a sermon. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Harmony UU podcast. Check us out online at harmonyuu.org for more details. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search Harmony UU. If you're in the Cincinnati area, please stop by one of our services on the first and third Sunday of each month at 10 a.m.